So Miriam obviously grew up in Portballintrae and came to live in Belfast a long time ago to study. And then I'm one of 5 kids, second oldest. Have to always remember that Sarah's like the baby. And I now work in Coleraine, work for a charity, and oversee staff there, but just kind of, what do I do? Do lots of things. Don't put this in.
What's in?
Oh, it's in. Yeah, work for a charity that's part of Vineyard Church, and we run lots of projects there, helping people in the community. So it's outward focused and just loving people where they're at. When I was studying, for a few years, I found myself saying that I was going to be a jewellery designer. But from when I was really little, art was all I ever wanted to do. And then I went to England to do a foundation course in art and came back to Belfast to do jewellery design. And did that for 3 years in Belfast. And during that time, I really encountered God's love in a way that I hadn't before, really encountered the Holy Spirit. And during that time, I was getting ready to go and do a business course in Kilkenny for craftspeople. And coming up to crafty craftspeople. But I also was on this journey with just really encountering God, and He was changing me. And towards the end of studying, I was sitting in uni one day, and probably one of the clearest times I've heard God speak to me. I felt Him ask me, would I go into ministry? Would I do youth work? And straight away I said yes. And I didn't know what that looked like. And I didn't know that 4 or 5 months later, I would be in the BlueHouses. The BlueHouses had been established the year before, and I'd heard about it through the wee church that I grew up in. And I knew of this place called the BlueHouses in Ballysillan. I didn't really know where Ballysillan was, but I knew that it was near the Shankill. And during that summer, I just found myself thinking I'm meant to go to Ballysillan. But because I didn't really know where it was, I was like, I think that's where I'm meant to go. So I stayed at home during the summer and then moved back to Belfast, and ended up doing, I basically called into Youth for Christ headquarters offices one day and asked them about volunteering opportunities. And then I walked down the street to the other end of Fitzwilliam Street and went into a volunteer organisation. And they were about to start the Prince's Trust programme the next day, and they had a space left. So they were like, you should come and do it, and you get to do a placement. And so I started doing their maybe 8-week programme. I can't remember how many weeks it was. And then through that, I asked if I could do a placement here. And I came up to meet the team that were here at the time. And I remember the guy asking me like why I wanted to come here. And I just felt totally overwhelmed and was like, I just know that I'm called to work with people. And I think this is where God wants me to be. And then just was a mess because I had no other explanation than why Ballysillan. And I think from that day, it just was really clear, like I was to be here, and it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense to my family why I was coming to work in a place in North Belfast that at the time probably wasn't very safe to be, whenever I had just done my degree and I was throwing it all down the drain apparently. And so I ended up, within a few weeks I was here and volunteering, and then that led to starting to work here full time, and that was 29 years ago. First memories, walking around the streets and kind of feeling like I stood out like a sore thumb, but feeling really safe at the same time because I knew that I was where God wanted me to be. So I remember there being soldiers on the streets, and I remember people at times kind of stopping and saying like, oh, you know, we know who you are. But I never felt intimidated because I knew that this is where I was meant to be. And then I remember just like building friendships with people. It was funny, I was thinking about this earlier, and both amazing Dickie and Francie lived across the street whenever I first started here. And at the start, they used to give me such a hard time. Like literally, why don't you just close the doors and, go and do something else? It's too, like, this community doesn't need the BlueHouses, and they would give off about all the noise at night when drop-in was on, and it was a bit chaotic. And then just over time, I think they realised that I wasn't going anywhere. And I remember one night going over to Francie and just being like, look, here's the deal. The BlueHouses are here to stay, and we want to serve this community, and I want to be here to help, like, love and care for the kids in this community. And that just changed everything. And then after that, I would have been over in their house all the time having cups of tea with Francie and Liz and the kids, and Dickie and Sadie. And things just took a wee bit of time to change, but people warmed up to there being people in the community that weren't from here. I think when they realised that actually we were trustworthy and were here for the long haul. And yes, people came and went, but there was consistently people who were here for the long haul. I remember way back at the start, there's a lovely girl called Shay who came and interned with us from California, and it was like a baptism of fire for her coming to the Shankill. And we used to prayer walk one night a week, and we came across all sorts of things that we got to pray for, and God just kept showing up, because I think he was reminding me that all he'd asked me to do was to be obedient. And I had never needed to rely on him in the way that I did until I came here. And so, yes, it was a bit mental, and yes, my mum and dad probably had lots of things that they should have been concerned about, but actually I've never felt so much that there was somewhere that I needed to be as here. And I felt like it was the biggest gift I'd ever been given. And I look back and I think when people, sometimes talk about, like doing a job, here never felt like a job. It felt like, there was times it was really hard, but it just felt like the best place to be. And bringing people in, being like, come and join us, like, come and be part of the team, and come and be part of what God's doing in this community. And people just came because they wanted to be part of something. And I think that's what makes here really special, is it's always been somewhere that people have felt part of something. I started here, I think it was in the September '94, and then we planned summer serve for the following year, and had a team come up and join us for 2 weeks, and we were based in one of the churches, and all that was new for me. I had very little youth work experience other than doing summer schemes. So it felt like being thrown in at the deep end. But that for me felt like we got really established in the community, because we actually got to know not just little pockets of kids, but we got to know loads of kids from the community, and kids even from outside Silverstream. Because we were down in, I think it was the Church of Ireland or the Methodist Church. And that summer, I think, is when we really found our feet and got to bring other people in who just came and embraced the community. And I think that summer was a really special summer, because we saw God do loads of things, like miracles, loads of people, just everyday kind of stuff, but people getting healed. like I remember somebody broke their foot one night and we got to pray for them and their foot got healed, and things like that happened for those 2 weeks, and people were just blown away by the power of God, but also seeing this team that had come just to love them and befriend them and care for them and provide fun and a bit of an escape from what was going on in the community during the rest of the year. It just felt like a bit of light relief for people, and I think after that things kind of got cemented in a bit. But I would say the first 6 years were hard, and then things turned a corner. And when I look back, if I'm talking to someone who's maybe gone to plant something or establish something somewhere, I think that that's a natural thing. I think that there's a bit of, like, when you build a house, you break up the ground and put the foundations in. And I think those first 6 years were breaking up the ground, putting in the foundations, building trust, building relationship with people, not having an agenda other than just to be in the community. And then things really began to like develop and grow after those. But it was just a different season, and each season was important because you can't, what happens here now wouldn't happen without what happened a season ago. And like, so there's been lots of seasons in the BlueHouses, and like I'm looking at those photos and think, you know, every person who's been through these doors, or who, like in schools where, you know, schools works happened, or whatever the connection, it doesn't matter what the time frame has been, there's always something that gets deposited in someone whenever you just are wanting to serve without an agenda. Yeah. Well, I was thinking through what were some of the words that came to mind for me, and safety probably was in the top 2. And I think from the word go here felt like a place of safety, when there maybe weren't other places that felt safe. Hope, family, relationship. Those were all the words, all the values that here was built on, and still are at the core of what here is. I think when I look back, and then, you know, we would have spent a lot of time praying for the community and asking God what his heart was for here and what he wanted to do. And so those words come from that heart of knowing, like, this is what here's to exist for. There will be lots of other things, but if those things aren't at the core, like they need to be at the core, then someone needs to feel safe to be able to feel themselves. And if someone comes in and they don't feel safe, they're not actually going to open up. And so that needs to be at the foundation of what people experience, and know that they're safe for being who they are. They don't have to believe a certain thing or be a certain way or act a certain way to feel safe. But it's that whole thing of helping people to discover who they are, and to give themselves permission to live out loud, I suppose, to put it in a cheesy way, but to not try and be like someone else or to feel like they have to fit a mould. And I think being a young person's hard, and it's harder now than even 20 years ago. I think there's so many pressures, and with social media and the way school can be for people, and just not really knowing who you are as a teenager, it can be really hard to feel safe anywhere, even at home at times. And I think here for me always felt like home. It should be a home from home, and even just like, you know, the image of the BlueHouses, and that here would feel like there. I mean, there's kids who spent as much time here as they did probably in their own houses, and it wasn't just about a programme, but it was about coming and belonging. And then once you belong, like, to fully get invested in and then help other people come and belong as well.
So what is it for you though? How does it make you feel? And it's amazing that this happens, but whenever you reflect on your footprints here, very much so, and how does it make you feel whenever you know that you developed a culture that is sustained, and part of that culture's DNA was providing a safe place for people?
Stop making me cry. I kind of feel like that's what I was made for. And I got to do here what I was made for. And I'm really thankful for that. And you don't know what that looks like until you look back. I'm really thankful that being part of something at the start, which felt very unknown to me. I mean, Port Ballantrae and Ballysillan in terms of culture couldn't be any further apart. And yet here always felt like home for me. And I think it just felt like a bit of an adventure. So it wasn't like there was a handbook that was like, here's what you do in year 1 and here's what you do in year 3 and whatever. I was reading back over just some of my journals, because I've literally got journals from like I first started here, and just consistently that reminder to love people. And that's easy some days, and some days it's hard. And when someone's, those early years, there was definitely times where you had to dig really deep. And then there was times where here felt like just the best gift ever, because I got to work with amazing people and just be around like amazing people. Most of them revolve around laughing until you could throw up. Banter, joy, just like Ballysillan's own unique culture and language. When I even with Beck on the phone there, I was straight back to 15 years ago, and hearing him and all his wee words and whatever. There's some of the stories are significant, people making significant decisions, and so moments of someone kind of discovering more of who they were created to be, or having times where I felt God was speaking to us about something, and then seeing that unfold and being able to say, God really cares about here, and he's provided the money for this building because he really cares about here. Or having a target of a certain amount of money to keep the place open, and going, God, only you can do that. And that happened within my first few years here. The BlueHouses were going to close, and I knew that God was saying they're not going to close. And I was like this kid who was just sticking her heels in, going, no, God has said. And he came through and provided the money that we needed, because we were running out of money to keep the building open. And then there's stories where they're just bonkers. I think of the train journey to Romania, and I'm like, how somebody didn't get decapitated when they stuck their head out the window on this train that was about 50 years old, and sleeping on top of a boat hotel because the air conditioning had broke. And all of stories like that, they're just, I feel so lucky to have had those experiences. And I was thinking about what are some of the first things that come into my mind. And this morning I remembered one of the summers we'd gone to the beach in Portrush, and I was driving the minibus, and White Rocks was absolutely rammed, and got this parking space down at White Rocks in the car park, reverse parked in and everything. I was so proud of myself. I was like, check me out, And then we were on the beach for a while, and I don't know how many of us were there, but there was maybe 2 busloads of us. There was quite a lot. And then it was time to go home, and I went looking for the bus keys, and they weren't where I'd left them. I was like, where are the keys? Like, what am I going to do? How am I going to get everybody home? And, we had to be home for a certain time, and it was kind of pushing towards the time we needed to leave. And then somebody owned up that they'd hid the keys in the sand because they didn't want to go home. Right, we're on white rocks. Like, how am I going to find the keys? And they thought, like, this was totally valid excuse. And the keys, when they turned up, so we were like, we have to pray because we're not getting home and there's no spare keys and this is it. And the keys were like not anywhere near where we were, and the person couldn't remember where they'd left them, and we found the keys and were able to make it home. And as much as that was really frustrating, one, it showed me, okay, God, you care about finding the keys. But the other thing was that group of kids really wanted to stay at the beach because they were having such a good time. And of course, it seemed totally logical that you would hide the keys because that would mean you could get to stay longer. I wish they'd just hidden them in a plastic bag somewhere.
Or your pocket.
Or my pocket, another pocket. Yeah. Like going into the school, primary school, and being Milestone and Poundstown or Pansy and Daisy. Like when I was reading earlier, some of the schools work we did, like back in 1999, we went in, we were doing Alpha in the girls' model, and then we did our first Alpha here. And I think I'd written that there was 26 teenagers came to that. And at that point, that was still a fairly new thing for us to do here, and to introduce a whole group of teenagers to who Jesus is and to what worship is, and to be able to just answer loads of questions. And like I'd written, repeatedly answer probably the same questions over and over again, but just being able to do all of that through building relationship. Like when I think back to my first year here, I remember contacting the CU at Queen's Christian Union and just asking did they have any students that would want to come and volunteer. And there was a whole group of students came, and maybe 6 or 7 lads. And out of that group, like there was one guy who came back a few years later and volunteered again. And one of those guys actually became the minister in one of the Presbyterian churches and has been here in the last number of years. Like that's 20 odd years later. I think God wanted us to be here so that then other people could get to come here and be part of what it was like this was his dream. And then for each of our lives, he plans, and they all got to coincide. And so being able to like look after and steward here was the role. And it was to bring people in, whether they were volunteering or young people or families or parents. And just being open to who's God highlighting or what's he saying. And, when I think back to like you guys bringing your youth groups here, and it was like alien to them, and seeing just like this place is brilliant, like these kids are brilliant and wanting to be here, and how connection can happen regardless of what your background is. And for me, watching those relationships, especially start during summer programs, but then continue to grow, and people staying on because it wasn't just a summer thing, but they wanted to be here for the long haul. And then when I think of different people that came from the States or different countries to intern or to give a year, and the sacrifice that people made to come and be here, we all kind of brought something to each other. So yes, we brought something to this community, but way more than that, this community gave something to each of us. And I think that's why people wanted to stick around, because of being embraced in and being just made to feel part of up here, and then just kind of making sure that there was a flow of just respect and love among people, so that someone new coming in didn't feel like it was cliquey, even though you want it to feel really established. It always had to feel welcoming to someone who was coming in new. And I think we did that quite well. I'm sure there was times where maybe someone new did feel a bit like, I don't know how to find my place here, but I think it's just I think it just takes a wee bit of time as well, and it's all about introducing people, so that you can almost pass on a bit of the relationship you have and the history that you have, so that somebody else can take ownership of those stories as well. Like I said, there was some difficult times on the run up to Pete starting, and I remember praying really specifically that God would make it really clear to me who the next person was that was to be here. And he spoke to me about Pete, and I didn't really know Pete very well. And I remember calling him one night on the phone and getting a chat with him, and I think he was still in Soul Survivor over in England at the time. And he was coming back, and I just remember chatting to him and thinking, yeah, I think this is who God's got for here. So it actually was I was so determined that it needed to be the person that, because at that point I was here on my own, and there had been people who'd come and gone, and for various reasons, and but for that time I was on my own, but with volunteers, and then Pete started, and I guess that opened up more opportunities for us to be able to even just have more people in during the day, and where it's not just a girl on her own, but like it was right, and it felt great, and we got on brilliantly, and complement each other's strengths and weaknesses, and my complete lack of IT skills. I feel so fortunate and blessed for what we got to build together, and because of that I know that lots of people then wanted to come and be part of that mix that was here. In 2010 I knew that I was to go away for a few months. I just knew that God was inviting me to take some time and I guess go and do some training, and I spent 3 months at the start of 2011 in the States, and it was a really good time. I probably wouldn't have chosen to go and do that unless God had made it really clear. But then when I was there, I knew that it was just a time to kind of reset and refresh, and then I suppose for me, being here was always about providing different opportunities for people, and one of those was kind of doing church but in an informal way, and I always felt that was part of what I was to do. And then in 2012 I had felt that I was to go and do some more training. If that was going to be what I did here, that I needed to go and actually do some training for that. So when I left in August in 2012, it was with the view that I was going away for 9 months and was going to come back here with a bit more of a purpose of establishing something that was a bit more like church, but alongside what we were doing here. And that was it. That was my plan. And it really if anybody had told me at that point it was going to be longer and I wasn't coming back, it would have been really hard. Like, leaving that would have been really, really difficult. And then whenever I was away, I remember a couple of times people that didn't know me sharing some things with me, that they felt that actually I was going to be there longer than the 9 months. And I just disregarded it actually at the start. I was like, yeah, they don't really know what they're talking about. And then I remember someone said to me that they thought at some point I was going to go back to where I grew up. And I really disregarded that. I was like, yeah, they really don't know what they're talking about. And so I spent that first 9 months specifically doing a course that I'd set out to do. Like, there was different courses you could choose, but I did this one specifically, looking at church planting and how to do that in your own environment. And then as the year came to an end, I actually felt like I was to stay for the second year, because it was a continuation of the first, but there was more like leadership development. And I hadn't realised that until I got there, that it was kind of a 2-year thing rather than you could leave after one, but it was more so that you were there for 2. And then I don't know at what point I realised that I wasn't coming back here, but I ended up being there for 3 years, and in that year I knew that I wasn't coming back. But I don't know exactly at what point. And I had journeyed a lot of stuff the second year with my dad dying. So there was just a lot going on for me personally that year. I'm probably just trying to be present and staying in the moment and trying to not figure it all out. But I knew that I just needed to be there and actually not try to know what was coming next. But I think for me the hardest thing was knowing that I hadn't left somewhere. I hadn't left here the way I thought I would leave. And that was really hard. Because you don't stay somewhere for 18 years for the fun, the crack of it. Those were decisions, really intentional decisions on my part. Being obedient to what I felt I was to do. And so I felt a bit like, kind of goes against everything in me to just be like, oh, see ya, I'm not coming back. But I had to be okay with that, because I knew that it was a different season for me. And I was really proud of here. And here was really established. And I needed to be okay with doing the next thing that God wanted me to do. I think that whole time for me, a lot of it was about identity, and even some of that had started the year before, where I felt God was speaking to me about my identity is in Him, and it doesn't matter where I am. I need to be open-handed, because wherever I am, that's what's important.
Yeah.
Had it happened a couple of years before that, I think I would have really been grieving, and it would have been much harder. It was hard, but because I was on this journey of being willing to say, God, this is all yours, and I'm yours, and wherever you want me to be is where I want to be. Sometimes that's easier to say than it is to do in practice. But I think God was really kind to me and had begun to do some of that stuff in my heart without me knowing. Or like I said, it might not have been as easy a surrender. It probably would have yeah, I probably would have fought it a bit more if it had been a out of the blue, be in here and then God saying I want to take you somewhere else. Because I would have felt like I was leaving the place that as far as I knew, I was going to be here until.
Yeah, they carried you away.
Yeah, I think that's what made it easier, was because they were all really safe hands, and I felt like I was kind of handing over my baby. But not just mine, like, you know, it was, if it had been a new team and it was me leaving, that would have been really different. I would have felt really responsible, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
And I knew here was in really safe hands, so that wasn't an issue. And I guess I had this mixed sense of leaving the place that has been home for years, but also real excitement, because my excitement for going to the States was something that God was doing in me. And yes, there was excitement, but it was hard because I was leaving here, I was leaving family, I was leaving nieces that were really little, and so there was a cost that came with it. But the excitement of what I felt God was going to do really outweighed the things that were hard. And because so many things came together in a really short space of time, I knew that it was all going to be okay. And it was that reassurance of, well, I've seen God do this for 18 years. He's provided, he's brought people, he's given me incredible friendships. Like, I look back and I actually feel like I know not everyone gets to have the level of friendships that we've had through here. That's really unique, but that's all I'd ever known. So I was like, this is just what it's like to have amazing friends. And I think I heard somewhere a couple of years ago that if you've got 3 really good friends, you know, that's quite uncommon. And I mean, you know yourself, the friendships that we created through here have been some of the most special friendships I've ever, they will be lifelong friends, you know. Here is where I talk about all the time. When I refer back to something that I've learnt it here. When I think about journeying with people, I think back to here. When I think about my family loving other people outside of our family, I think to here, because this wasn't just about me. It was about my whole family. It was about my mum and dad supporting here, praying for here, providing financially for here, coming up on nights and bringing up, you know, sandwiches and whatever, coming up and painting walls, and just like here. And lots of the things that I was learning in the States, I was able to go, here's the theory that I'm learning, but actually here was the practice of that. And so everything has been linked to here. What I'm doing now, working in a community, it's just I've transferred lots of my learning. And yes, while it's not youth work, it's working with people, and actually all we're called to do is to love people. But it might look practically different. It's being able to look at people in the eye and connect with them and let them know that they matter, regardless of what's going on with them or where they're from, or see past a behaviour to what's really going on in that person's life. So sometimes I think, oh, I'm not really an expert in anything. But I have to just be okay that it's not about being an expert, it's just about using what you've got, and always wanting to grow, and always thinking that there's more that you can grow in, so that you don't come across as the person that is like oh, well, I've got it all together, but actually being able to share your weaknesses with other people and then invite people into that so that you can build trust. And I think for me, when I think of here, the phrase journeying together, walking alongside, is a phrase that I always want to do wherever I am, so that it doesn't feel like, I'm a step ahead, so let me show you, but let's walk this together.
Yeah. I'm dyslexic, one big difference.
Like
I think it's spelled
lighthouse on the hill, like that is what here is. It's that beacon for people. That's that place of safety, that place of refuge, but also of like freedom and expanse. And that's not 3 words, but you know what I mean.